Good evening. It may be 9 o'clock, it may be 10 o'clock, it may be 8 o'clock. I don't know. The time zone change thing just throws me completely for about 3 weeks or a year. But do you know where your kids are? If they're cool kids, they're looking at this right now and they want to find out about EPL, Premier League stuff with the American Scouser TV EPL panel show with some of the best minds of the game that I've seen on the internet, on podcasts, etc. And me, I'm also here just to keep things toddling along. We're joined by Glenn and apparently the Invisible Man because he keeps shifting in and out. If anybody's as old as me and remembers Gemini Man from back in the 80s, that's what we've got here today. So, boys, how are we?
Good, thanks, Macca.
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Celebrating today.
Celebrating today.
Tottenham gave us a
Tottenham. We'll get on to a bit of that, but we'll do a quick review of the FA Cup and who has survived Premier League wise. We'll talk about goalkeepers and by extension Spurs and their troubles, which is Jay's favourite topic for this week. And then we look ahead mostly to this weekend's games and the Tonali picks because we're back into the real stuff. Now the FA Cup, I think Port Vale was the only shock result, really, was it? The only lower kind of team.
Southampton, which was Mike Tonali's pick, Macca.
Hang on, there we go. Sorry, I've got a. I don't know what that even is. Probably a piece of pasta or something like that from 2 hours ago. I like to save. I like to save food for the winter. Now, here's the thing. I have the results, I believe. Yes, I do. Now, Mansfield Town putting up a very, very creditable performance, I think, against Arsenal. I think they were maybe a little bit hard done by. Port Vale beating Sunderland. The West Ham Brentford game, we can talk about that. We will talk about that. Chelsea and Wrexham, quality told in the end, but Wrexham gave a great account of themselves. I watched that one. I thought it was an enjoyable game. And then, of course, Fulham losing to Southampton. Some thoughts I've heard on that from the radio pundits, etc. And then Leeds. It's basically more or less, the Premier League teams doing what they do. My question first is, here's what I hear. It was. I believe it was Adrian Heath said this today, earlier this morning. I thought it was an excellent point. And he said, you don't see as many lower league teams cause upsets in the FA Cup these days because even the lower league teams have pristine carpet-like surfaces, whereas before they'd be like park football grounds. There'd be just mud and grass and divots all over the place, and it leveled the game out for everybody. So just as an initial thought, Jay and Glenn, what do we think about that? Do we think that the scramble to get the most up-to-date facilities has actually made it more difficult for the lower league teams in the FA Cup, or is it just that the top teams are amassing talent like there's no tomorrow? And even though the championship teams and maybe the League One teams can compete on a single team basis, we're maybe not going to see as many upsets as we did before because the talent is coagulating at the top nearly.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the Macclesfield showed that having a harder, more unusual surface pays dividends, right? They obviously beat Crystal Palace and gave us a really hard game as well, and that was the kind of surface that you need to train specifically on as a bigger team beforehand to get used to. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'm sure the surface comes into it, but obviously so do other factors, right? Like fans, the weather, the strength of the team that the bigger team puts out, right? Obviously this is, we've kind of scrapped the replays as well, which is obviously a real shame, right? And that means that smaller teams can't maybe hold out for a draw away from home and then make the bigger team come to their place in the replay, right, and put them under pressure there. So that immediately takes out a certain segment of the kind of underdog having a home advantage. But yeah, it's a good point. But there's still been enough upsets. Like there were some relatively small teams that went very far in this year's FA Cup, right, and are still in it, right, with Port Vale beating Bristol City and Sunderland within the same week with the same goal scorer to win it was pretty incredible. So, and they're doing awfully in their division, right? They're languishing. So I still think the cup set is very much alive. It feels like we've had a year where there's been some really big surprises, but yeah, that really gritty, messy, muddy kind of Grimsby, Macclesfield home advantage that makes it really hard. Yeah, the quality of pitch does filter down, but those early rounds, right, Macca, before the state of some of those pitches before the big come in, it's something to behold.
It just reminds me of my playing days. That's what I like about those. Carpet, what's that? I don't even have that at home. Now, another point was made about Fulham and their Jay, about their loss. They made Marco Silva made a lot of change. Marco Silva, yeah, I always get him wrong with Marco. Oh, yeah, Marco Silva made a lot of changes, and the point was made was that they're not going to get relegated and they're not really competing for Europe. So why not give the fans and the players something to play for by going for it in the FA Cup? Do you think there's maybe too much emphasis on this rotation thing and resting thing that we forget, that the clubs forget, the fitness people forget, and the managers forget? Fans don't go to see players rested. They go to see players win games. That's why we support our teams. There may be local loyalties that go into it. There may be generational loyalties that go into it, but ultimately we support our teams because we want to see them compete for something. We want the day to cheer about, even if it's the Zenith Data Systems Cup or the EFL Trophy. If you're one of the lower league teams, that's the goal, isn't it? That's why we pay our money week in, week out, and we buy 10 million jerseys. Hey, let's have the home jersey, the second home jersey, the away jersey, the third away jersey, the jersey we'll wear for one game, the training kit. We don't do that to watch players have a nice balanced periodized season, do you? We watch them to compete.
Yeah, I think I'd never agree with rotation to the degree in which we see it, and teams often get caught out. And to your point, Glenn's point, I never understand why teams that aren't going to get relegated, aren't really competing for Europe, don't just stick with their main team. But I've seen this is an opportunity for squad cohesion, giving players a start. If you do not lose a game you should win, then it works fine. But honestly, I never really understood it. But in what came out this year with kind of Chelsea, Maresca, and the medical team having more of a say, rotating players, preventing injuries, I think football is a business. They're viewing all of these players as assets, and realistically, are Fulham going to win the FA Cup? Probably not. But if our kind of $25 million winger gets injured for 6 months, that potentially is starting to hurt us next season. So maybe we just rotate and keep. I think teams are playing the odds, and they're not really leaning into the magic of the cup, thinking, what if we won? What if we got into Europe? Because the odds would suggest that they're not going to.
But now here's my question to you, because for some strange, stupid reason, I did a philosophy degree in college, and so logic is always a big thing in my head. You wouldn't know it from a day-to-day life. It looks fairly chaotic and pointless. But the logic of keeping a player out of an FA Cup tie with some sort of glory at the end of it, just so you can keep them for the next league game, that means next to nothing, on the basis that he may get injured in the FA Cup game, is kind of nullified by the fact that he may get injured in the Premier League game. It's a really bad call to make, isn't it, logically?
I think it's easy to make in hindsight, right? But yeah, I don't agree with it. I'm with you. But we've even seen some, we were talking about the surfaces improve earlier, right? You've even seen, as kind of lower league teams have got investment and they're trying to move up, kind of like the Wrexhams, like the, I guess, like Birmingham's and whomever. A lot of these teams are also rotating. Like Kiefer Moore didn't start for Wrexham against Chelsea. Like they rotated as well, even though it was up against their biggest game, because the value and the prize at the end of the tunnel is so big getting into the Premier League that the one night of magic, they're not going to win the FA Cup. One night of magic, even the reward of getting to the next round is not as big as the big payout of getting to the Premier League. So I think a lot of those teams are playing it smart if they're in playoff contention anyway, because it's not the teams that are not fighting for the honours in whatever division they're in that are getting to the later stages of each round.
And now, Glenn, one point I think no, do you know what it was? Danny Higginbottom. Now, because I remember, he was saying that when he was playing for Stoke, Tony Pulis, they got the year they got into the final. And who did they lose? There was a City 1-0 in the end a couple of years ago. He said like Tony Pulis decided to just go full strength, and what happened was because they won, all the team got a lift, and it carried over into their league games. They started with, I think they said they beat Newcastle 4-0 in the very next game because they were still high on the thing of getting into the quarterfinals and the semi-finals and stuff. And then he did his Achilles tendon and he got them into the final and then injured himself. But that's a thing to take into account. I think Jay is perfectly correct about a team like Wrexham that has maybe a bigger goal, but a team like Fulham with nothing to play for, really, they're essentially playing dead rubbers for the rest of the season. It's literally how many more millions can we add from a higher place and in the league, and it's not. I don't think it's that much from 5th to 8th really in the difference. Do you think managers and by extension fitness people, if they're having more of a say than I think they really should, are they doing a disservice to both the players and the fans by saying, well, hang on here, like you may have nothing to play for, but you might get a sore toe if you play in this game?
Yeah, definitely. That's really boring, isn't it? I guess, Macca, it's like not a fun way to approach a season or to approach a tournament, right? What I think's interesting, Macca, about the way that teams approach this FA Cup round is that playing your full strength team was not a guarantee. Not that it would ever be a guarantee, but it did not fully correlate with success. So Brentford against West Ham, we played a full 11, not a single change. They rotated 7, right? 7 people from the last league game. They play fairly well. They beat us on penalties, right? Fair and square. No problem with that. Credit to their, not reserves is strong, but credit to their second string to come up and do that. Leeds United, they rotated pretty heavily. They brushed aside Norwich City. Now you get the case of Fulham, which is you do it badly, right? You rotate. And I said they're my Tonali's pick because I said Southampton have found some form, and so they did. But you get a team like Sunderland, right, who plays a strong team, one of their strongest possible 11s against Port Vale, treats it with respect, just like Brentford. Brentford and Sunderland had the opposite idea of Fulham. We wanted it. But wanting it and playing that full-strength team, because it's a cup match, I just found it really interesting that did not correlate with going through, right? So that I thought was just a really interesting quirk of this particular round. Some of the bigger boys, well, I mean, West Ham are obviously a bigger club than Brentford per se, but where we are on the table and where we are on the form table, you would think a full-strength Brentford team would have enough to beat West Ham backups. Sunderland, strong team. You would think they would have more than enough to get over a struggling Port Vale team, right? So although I completely agree with the philosophy, Brentford did it the right way, Sunderland did it the right way, Fulham did it the wrong way. We all suffered and we all went out and they were all upset. You know what I mean? So I think that's really interesting. Playing your Premier League tried and tested team was not a ticket to the quarterfinals. And that is also why we love the FA Cup, right? Because just because you put out a strong team, it doesn't mean that is just because you were philosophically agreeing with the idea of the cup, which every team should do, in my opinion, that didn't always equal getting through. And I was like, that's why I think this FA Cup this season has been spectacular. I think there's been shocks throughout. I think there's been some brilliant upsets throughout. And I thought this was a really fascinating 5th round of matches, right? There were lots of games that were really, really compelling for lots of different reasons. And the Wrexham game, as you both alluded to, it was just a thrilling game. That's just a good game of football, right? That's just a cracking game of football. And as Jamie said, right, Wrexham had to make a couple changes in the margins, right? So yeah, it was really interesting. Leeds did it well, right? Leeds did it the best. They rotated, they won. And that's what Brentford did at Macclesfield, right? In the previous round, we were like, we're fighting in the Premier League. We're looking at maybe Europe. We're not going to play our full strength team, but we're going to hope we absorb enough pressure and just have enough quality to see it off at the end, which we did. But you are playing with fire when you do that. And Fulham found out the hard way. You can't take it for granted, right? Which was also really interesting.
So what you're saying is Port Vale for the cup?
Definitely.
Right.
Now, talk to me a little bit about your game, Glenn, before we go to the Wrexham Chelsea one. There's a lot of debate. Apart from my utter respect for Thomas Frank when he was your manager, my utter respect for Keith Andrews, future Ireland manager legend, get us to the World Cup and the European Championships 2 years 2 competitions in a row later on. With the Panenka penalty, he came out and defended his player the way you want a manager to defend a player, which was to put it in context. You know, it wasn't like, I will talk to the lad, or it was basically, look, it's just a game of football and people have been killed and assaulted and harassed because of stupid things like penalties. He took it, it didn't work out, let's just move on. What's your thoughts on that whole? I mean, I didn't get to see that one. I did see the Wrexham game, but I didn't get to see the West Ham Brentford game, and it seemed like it was a ding-dong battle up until the penalty shootout, when penalties are the lottery, they say they are for a reason. But were you, as a fan, upset at that Panenka attempt, or was it just, like, when they work, they're great, but they're not always going to work? What was your thoughts?
I mean, I was infuriated with it, Macker. It was awful. It was abysmal. It was the wrong choice. He froze in the moment. He didn't do it with conviction. You can't really stand there, stare for 20 seconds. And then it doesn't look like he had any conviction in doing it himself, right? Silly decision. And we've seen Panenkas in major competitions, major international cups, go wrong recently. We saw Enzo Lafay chip one straight at Kelleher literally a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, they're increasingly notorious for a reason, a Panenka. I just don't think the benefit of it going well, it covers the negative of it going badly and it looking so abysmal. If I was stepping up to take a penalty, my only concern is scoring. It's not whether it looks cool or if it's an occasion to showboat. What I liked about the situation was absolutely what you said, Macca, was how fiercely defensive Keith Andrews was, right? And his mentality, Macca, is you win as a team, lose as a team.
I mean, he probably gave him stick privately, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he probably said, was that the right choice at the right moment? Probably not, but Dango can take that.
I'm pretty sure he probably said it in more Irish vernacular.
Absolutely. But, to have your manager come out and fight for you like that, compare that to Igor Tudor, which we're going to get onto in a couple of minutes, right? You basically publicly humiliate your backup goalkeeper by subbing him after 17 minutes, and you ignore him, right? You ignore him on the touchline, right? And again, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but it looks like Tudor ignored basically every player that got subbed, and it sounds like, I haven't seen it, but it sounds like from Twitter that Jed Spence kind of, went up to him and kind of almost sarcastically tried to shake his hand after being ignored. So energy there is abysmal, but it's very different situations. And I feel for Tudor because he's been put in a really bad situation. And we'll get onto that. But just think about how those two managers decided to treat the players whom the heat was on. Dango gets backed 110%, and he basically tells the press to F off and defends him, right? Whereas Tudor, I get he's under pressure. I get he's not going to be there very long. But he decides to cover for himself and his awful decision by playing this rotated goalkeeper. He's going to publicly humiliate him, right? Now, those are just two really fundamentally different approaches to protecting or humiliating a player who has really messed up. I mean, yeah, Dango really, really messed up. He cost us potentially a quarterfinal, and he potentially cost us maybe a semifinal. But when all is said and done, we had 90 minutes, 120 minutes penalties against a rotated West Ham side. And what you would hope, Macca, is that a team like Brentford, who is flying in the Prem and plays our full-strength team, you would hope we would have enough in the tank to win. Now, he came from behind twice, and it's no surprise that our two talismans, Jared Bowen and Igor Thiago, get braces, right? These are two people who kind of define the clubs they're playing for. Both got a penalty, both got a goal from open play. But again, across 120 minutes, you would hope that Thiago, Atara, Damsgaard, Sharda would have enough quality to get a winning goal. And if you're going to leave it to penalties, whether Dango takes a Panenka, whether he hits the post, whether he blazes it over the bar, you're gonna open yourself up to a mistake, right? And credit to West Ham, Kelleher, we would probably all agree, is a penalty expert. And if there was one goalkeeper, I would say in the world, I would want in my goal for a penalty shootout today, it's Kelleher. And credit to West Ham for pinging 5 unstoppable penalties in the corners. And at some point, you just have to take, as we just said in the chat, just not our day. A different day we play a bit better and we win 3-2 or 2-0 in normal time, right? If you leave it to penalties, well, there's no point in singling out a person and blaming him. It's a whole team effort to win a game. But nonetheless, deciding to take a Panenka with a quarterfinal on the line and messing it up so badly, it's just not a good look. But he's got to own that. We all know that. There's no point all of us saying how terrible and stupid it was. He knows that. Hopefully he doesn't do it again. You know, what can you say? Move on.
He probably will.
He probably will. He'll keep doing it until it works, I guess.
Till it works. Now, Jay, the Wrexham Chelsea game, the only kind of summary thought I had about was basically quality told at the end. But it was a nice glimpse, maybe not for you as a Chelsea fan watching it, but it was a nice glimpse to see the team that wants to be in the Premier League, that has all this media attention on its efforts to get into the Premier League. It was a nice insight into what they're doing, but in the end, Chelsea just had the quality, really, didn't they?
Yeah, they pushed us close. To be honest, though, I mean, we weren't great, we weren't terrible. I think they had a couple of really good goals. I think they were so up for that as well. Like, the whole city seemed up for it. The crowd, the stadium was vibing. I think Wayne Rooney said it was the best game he's watched since he retired. Which is saying something. Like, they're pretty good, right? Like, they've got some talent. Sam Smith, the forward who doesn't normally start, was really, really good. And it looked like Tosin had a parachute tied to his back. I think it is amazing, the levels, though, right? You look at, like, we say Sanchez is bad. He's a lot better than Wrexham's goalkeeper. And then you look at, like, Pedro, like, a bit of quality at the end, finishing it just to finish him off. But Garnacho, who's looked like he was running in quicksand recently, against Championship players, looked electric and incredibly dangerous down the left-hand side of him really well. Also played really well. Liam Delap found his level, right, against a Championship side. Like, I've always said, he looked like a Championship player playing for Chelsea, and here we are, playing against a Championship team. He didn't even dominate. But I thought they had so much heart. They played so well. It's really, in order, like, to try and, I don't want to seem like I'm being or putting Wrexham down. They did really well. I mean, obviously I'm a Chelsea fan, but it would have been, like, I wouldn't have been terribly sad had we actually lost that, to see Wrexham go through. They played with so much heart. Quality came through at the end. That was a definite red card from Dobson. I think it's just sad that it was a red card, because he's suspended for 3 games and they just lost against Hull today. So like it seems like they had a tough come down from what was the most electric night, or one of the most electric nights in Wrexham's kind of most recent history. Yeah, quality at the end. I think Chelsea could have finished it off earlier. We certainly had the chances, but they were very close as well to going 3-2 up, when I think it was Brunt's kind of, Kiefer Moore headed it on. It looked like it was going in. Brunt on the line heads it in, and he was in offside position. Like, that could have really put the cat amongst the pigeons. VAR, offside. Like, I think it's very odd that VAR comes in halfway through a tournament. You think either you have it or you don't. But as a Chelsea fan, I guess I'm thankful, because it correctly gave an offside, and it, in my opinion, correctly gave a red card. But in the Champions League, we got like a 10-game ban. But yeah, a very, very exciting game of football. Stressful when it's your team, but for the neutral, I'm sure it was electric.
Now, I had a guitar. Well, he wasn't my guitar teacher, because I do have to play guitar, but he was on one of the music courses I was on, who was a big League of Ireland fan. And back in the day when League of Ireland players all had day jobs, and he used to always say his fear and conviction was the difference between League of Ireland teams and what were then the First Division English teams, and some of the European ones, but not the top, not the big 6 First Division, but like your Ipswiches and your Norwiches and all that kind of stuff, was that when they played in the preseason friendlies, the main difference was like fitness, like basically endurance and speed. And it's these games, when you see these up and coming clubs that are trying to make it into the Premier League, you can see the technical quality is there, obviously, for Chelsea, but they just find that other physical gear, don't they? They're able to step it up in pace, step it up in power, and keep that going for the 120 minutes or the 97 minutes or whatever happens to be.
You can bring on internationals as well. It helps, right? Yeah, Pedro, like Gusto's a French international. Even a lot of our bench are, right, as well as some of the juniors kids that came on. But I guess Wrexham, they bring on Kiefer Moore. He's an international, and tell you what, when you've got a leaky bucket of a defense who aren't good on crosses, having someone like Kiefer Moore come on is not what you want in a cup tie. Especially when the stadium's that up for it. Long ball, no thank you. Tosin and Badiashile didn't want too much of that.
I mean, what I liked about it was Wrexham played very logical football. That's what I'm all about. It's not about styles. It's just what makes sense in the moment. Sometimes it's playing 27 passes around the back, but sometimes it's lashing it down the field because you have a better target than they have defenders. Let's look at the draw for the quarterfinals, boys. What are we looking at there? Arsenal definitely. I think Southampton might have something on Arsenal.
It's another cup draw that's in Arsenal's favour, right? Champions League looks
it really is.
Chelsea, obviously, Port Vale, thank you. But Arsenal have kind of on the Champions League, decent draw. FA Cup, decent draw.
That's obviously the hot balls in the bag scenario again, but I mean it's a tough one for City and Liverpool there. Both in various stages of transition. But is it possible, Glenn? Do you think the final is out of the Chelsea, Port Vale, Southampton, Arsenal games? Because that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, again, from Brentford's perspective, it's frustrating because the draw was obviously made before we played West Ham, and it was Leeds at home. It's not an easy draw. Don't get me wrong. It's a good draw. It's a proper cup quarterfinal. Leeds at home. That's a good cup tie, and it's going to be a good game actually. Probably that West Ham Leeds game. Obviously, if Leeds somehow ended up getting dragged a little bit more, if they lose 1 or 2 on the bounce, right, they're going to, both those teams might be fighting on kind of survival fronts and a huge cup game. The Chelsea one's a bit of a gimme at home. It's tough. You've got to keep in mind, I mean, Arsenal are right now the best team in England, right? So if they got Southampton, West Ham, Leeds, Port Vale at home, that would be seen as a pretty straightforward draw, right? Especially Port Vale and Southampton. The fact it's away from home, I think Southampton away might be slightly trickier than maybe West Ham or Leeds at home, because you've got to go away. And as I said, Southampton are just in a rich vein of form right now. Yeah, you get the sense that, it's going to be us. That the tournament, it feels like, is going to be ultimately the winner of City or Liverpool, and then Arsenal. I think it's going to be between one of those three to win it. I mean, obviously Chelsea can do it, Jamie, don't get me wrong, but you guys are just so erratic this season, but then so are Liverpool.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It feels like if Arsenal are going to be on for a double of the Premier League and the FA Cup, I mean, they're storming it in the Champions League too, of course. If there was ever a treble-looking season, while not playing the most beautiful football anyone's ever seen, which is this biggest critique of Arteta ball, is it's just quite bland and quite brute force at times, but it is effective, right? And they're really testing, the philosophy of good quality football versus a philosophy of we just want 3 points every week, we just want to progress, right? And Arsenal are kind of bossing that. This draw to me says Arsenal could be on for a domestic double, and if they keep playing the way they're doing the Champions League, even not looking particularly fantastic and not looking particularly convincing, the season just seems to have parted for Arteta's team this season. The big boys are struggling. If they beat Southampton and maybe they get the winner of West Ham Leeds right in the semi, you've got a very, very doable, viable path to a final. And if it's Liverpool or Chelsea, say maybe, or City, Chelsea against Arsenal in the final, again, Arsenal will be favourites, right? Because they're top for the reason. So to me, this draw says Arsenal might win the FA Cup. That's the way I'd lean from this draw.
And before we move on, just looking at the quarterfinal, it's got a very mid to late 1970s vibe about it there, doesn't it? Southampton, Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Port Vale, Chelsea, West Ham and Leeds. That's definitely a 1974 quarterfinals if ever there was. So let's move on just very, very quickly to the Champions League today. Liverpool losing to Galatasaray. Spurs, which we'll move on to a little bit, getting absolutely walloped by Atletico Madrid, and surprisingly Newcastle doing themselves no harm of credit at all with a draw against Barcelona, and that last kick of the game almost as well. Tomorrow is Arsenal, Leverkusen, PSG, Chelsea. and then Madrid and City. The thinking was in some quarters was that the Premier League was exceptionally strong. I think Pep Guardiola even mentioned it, like the way the league phase went. It just seemed like the Premier League teams had a bit, the hustle and bustle of each game each week, and the constant playing just kind of created the momentum. But it's not seeing itself through to this knockout phase, as always. Knockout phases always are the great levelers. It looked like we might have, possibly an all Premier League semi-final, but it's looking a little bit less likely now, isn't it?
A little less likely, yeah. I mean, Liverpool aren't in great form. Only one behind. I think you'd have to be rather naive to have bet on Tottenham to beat Atletico. Saw some pundit was saying how that game was a complete referendum on the quality of La Liga if Atletico did not get something from Tottenham. But yeah, they just keep getting worse and worse, right? That was actually quite a good fight from the players on the pitch to not give up, come back. I saw Pedro Porro kind of score, and he didn't do his favourite Richarlison, pick up the ball and run back. Loves one of those, but was trying to motivate them. And yes, they lost 5-2 and are probably dead and buried. But like that could have been 6-7, and if it was, like, that would be fun. The following game, right? Like I actually was surprised that Igor Tudor showed up for the second half. I thought, like, there was a world, if that was Chelsea and it was Abramovich, there's a world he doesn't come out for second half.
Nah. What do you think tomorrow for your PSG game, Jay? You confident, or I mean, it's not the PSG of last year. I don't think they're not as fluid. Maybe
it's not. I think we're streaky as well. So I think it probably score draw would be a fairly conservative away from home bet, but we'll see. Obviously, Bodo Glimt are gonna win 4-0 at home. Sporting, right? Get to the final.
I mean, I looked up. I watched the Bodo Glimt are another team. They just play very logical football. There's no like fancy damn and stuff. It's not long ball. It's not possession. It's just what needs to be done at the time. Glenn, is Leverkusen a banana skin potentially for Arsenal, or do Arsenal have their stuff together? I mean, I'm thinking of the difference in styles almost. They're not, maybe not. German teams are still into that gegenpressing, maybe not as full force as it was about 10 years ago, but maybe they might cause problems to Arsenal that they don't face each week in the Premier League. But they've done well in the Europe so far, so it's a bit up in the air, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a decent tie. That's one I've got my eye on. I think that's going to be a decent watch home and away. Arsenal heavy favourites, obviously, top of the Premier League. But yeah, I'd keep my eye on that tie. I don't think that's a walk in the park for Arsenal. Yeah, that's a good team they're going up against, as you said, Macca. Stylistically, Arteta might have to answer some questions. Maybe they're not asked as frequently, right, in the English league. Right, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, obviously the big money tie is once again like clockwork. You get City, Madrid. I mean, that's just it's
like a timeshare in Champions League fixture form, isn't it?
It's hilarious. You just can't see anyone but Vinny Jr. getting on the score sheet for that. It's going to be good. And I mean, yeah, just to wrap up today's, I mean, heartbreak for the Geordies. I mean, that was just. And for Aaron Ramsdale to have a clean sheet against Barcelona until the 96th minute is just devastating. And it sounds like, I didn't watch that, but it sounds like Newcastle were very good value to be ahead, and they played some really good football. They're a real Jekyll and Hyde team this season. I cannot work.
Yeah.
There's a list of teams like Brighton, Newcastle have fallen into this list. Palace is kind of in this list as well. Teams I just cannot figure out if they're going to go out and win 3-0 every weekend, play great football, win 3-0, or just show up and get absolutely battered, maybe 4-1, whatever. They're just extremely inconsistent Premier League teams. But credit to Newcastle, that's a real gut punch, and that's a real coup for Barca to get away with a point. You just think they're going to have more than enough firepower at home to dispatch Newcastle. And then, the Spurs game, there was so much drama in the first 25 minutes. I was not planning to watch it, but I just went on Paramount Plus and I ran the whole game back from hit the first whistle and just watched the first 25 minutes. And we watch a lot of football, don't we, every week? Probably 2-3 games a week minimum. And like, there's not often a half stands out as like particularly calamitous. And I haven't seen much like that. I've seen some real bad football at Brentford over the years. And I don't think I've seen a more dysfunctional looking team than Spurs to be 4-0 down after 20 minutes. Keeper subbed, keeper humiliated, keeper with 2 clangers, Van der Ven with a clanger. I didn't realize it was Sarr, Spurs' player. I think that headed the ball towards his own goal for the save for the 4th. It's just a joke. And I mean, Jimmy, I mean, they clearly didn't give up attacking because they scored 2 goals. But as you also said, Jamie, there's a world in which that is 7 or 8-2, which is very reasonable because there were saves made. Just incredible. And you just have to think that I would be surprised if Tudor's still in charge against you guys at the weekend. I would say, I haven't seen the odds. I'd love to see the odds, actually. That'd be very interesting. But I would think I would favor him being out of there, desk cleared before that game, because you guys are so incredibly inconsistent too, Maka. But for this Spurs outfit to go to you guys, to go to Anfield, you could easily knock 3 or 4 past them with Ekitike, Salah, Wirtz is back in the team. If you guys beat them 3 or 4-0, if he doesn't go before the game, he goes after the game. You know what I mean?
I'm a triple captain Ekitike.
If I had my triple captain, that would be an absolute shout. If I hadn't wasted it on Gabriel, that would be really tidy. I think it's going to be open season, really. So, but wouldn't it be very Spurs to throw in a half decent performance and frustrate you guys? That would sum up your season.
Just like Liverpool to throw in a crap performance against the worst team, like the worst form team. But let's move on with that really good segue. Thank you so much, Glenn. To goalkeepers. Now this poor unfortunate was subbed 17 minutes in. Here's my question, and I believe, Glenn, you're a goalkeeper by trade. This was a slight debate on our Discord channel, the American Scouser TV Discord channel, which people who are watching should be members of if they're not already, as well as following and liking and subscribing, etc. But it was about the famous slip from 2013-14, and what Simon Mignolet could have done. Now, I'm not going to get into that particular debate there, but what my interesting thing is, I was a 5-a-side goalkeeper, and it was basically when the body broke down, it was the only position I could play. So I would never call myself a goalkeeper. I played in goal, if that makes any sense. Like the difference between being a guitar player and a guitarist, somebody who knows it inside out. Jimi Hendrix versus Jimmy Hill playing the guitar. But there's a lot of recency bias about goalkeepers' involvements in goals, isn't there? It's they're the last person that interacts with the shot or the passage of play, so therefore it must be their fault. Now, I've been in the game a long time. Usually, statistically, they say there's like 2 or 3 hours before the ball goes into the back of the net, and it's usually, I'm always looking at the first error because it's usually an unforced one that causes problems. But our goalkeepers, not just by fans, but also apparently by managers, are they given short shrift? Are they given the wrong end of the stick, the raw end of the stick, if that makes any sense, when it comes to who's at fault for goals? I haven't seen Kinski's performance, so I don't know if he was actually at fault for the goals. But like, was his performance that bad that getting hauled off at 17 minutes? Was it okay? But we've seen goalkeepers have been stranded by their teams and get all of the pelters at the end of the game. They get a bad deal, really, goalkeepers, don't they? Sometimes.
Well, they can do.
Highlighted, right?
What do you reckon, Jeremy?
I think their mistakes are just far. There's a far bigger, I guess, result when they make a mistake than a forward makes a mistake. Like if a goalkeeper saves four shots and lets in a sitter that they should have saved, then that can lose them a game. Whereas if the opposite's true on a striker and you miss 4 sitters but you score and it ends up being the game winner, you're a hero. Whereas in reality, like you arguably had a worse game. So that their errors are magnified completely. But like you are the linchpin of, especially in newer kind of modern football, where the goalkeeper's a ball playing participant in the attack in the start of play. Like if you have a couple of clangers early on, like we've seen with Rob Sanchez, like when he gets eerily close to doing something adjacent to one of these errors, and then everyone gets on his back, and it's like, good night, like please just kick the ball long. Like I felt really, really sorry for this young goalkeeper, like to not commit one, but commit two of them inside 15 minutes. Like, and it's also harsh that he doesn't get the opportunity to make a worldly and make up for it because he's just hooked. Yeah, like I think it is tough for goalkeepers, but I think that's what you sign up for. Really, that's not a secret.
I mean, they do say goalkeepers have to be crazy, don't they? Now, Glenn, I actually coached a 14-year-old goalkeeper way back when I started in Ireland who ate crayons for his lunch, literally ate crayons. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, when he was 16, he went for trials at Manchester United. I wasn't his coach at that point, but I also would not be surprised if they sent him back home on the first play because he was a bit too crazy for them. But here's my question, Glenn. Like we had this situation with Liverpool in 2019, the Champions League final with Karius in the final, and gets the concussion, which we found out later on was a concussion. And he just had a spacey game after that. He wasn't the best. He wasn't a terrible goalkeeper before that, but he certainly wasn't an Ali level Liverpool goalkeeper. But he never seemed to have recovered from the mistakes in that game. And that's the danger, isn't it? When you hook a goalkeeper rather, 17 minutes in, you're essentially saying as a manager, aren't you, you're the reason we're losing. Not the setup. That people forget, certainly the managers seem to forget. If you don't let the shot happen, if you don't let the ball near your goal, then the goalkeeper doesn't have to make any mistakes. But because the Spurs, at least the BBC commentary on the website, they were at 6s and 7s and 8s even at times, the Spurs defense, and were fairly disorganized. It becomes, I mean, you really do have to be Ali in that situation, don't you? You have to be Alisson Becker or Peter Shilton or prime, what's his name, Peter Schmeichel. Yeah. You have to be that good just to have an average game. And it's really not fair on the keepers, is it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, it was ridiculous from Tudor to put him in, right? He's played like a handful of Carabao Cup games this year. This is his Champions League debut. It's away at Atletico Madrid. It's a cauldron. It's a great atmosphere. He is stepping into a team, as you're alluding to, Maka, that is defensively shambolic. He is stepping into a team. Van de Ven and Romero have just both given up the ghost this season. Porro is a shadow of the player he used to be. Jed Spence blows hot and cold every single weekend. Structurally, Spurs are just a complete shambles. So what you're doing is you're putting a goalkeeper who maybe he's not lacking confidence in training, but he's lacking match fitness, right? And he's young, as you said, right, Jamie? He's like, you're barely 20, 21, 22. And you're basically sticking him into the most high-pressure situation, which is odds are Atletico win 2 or 3-0, right? They should brush you guys aside. And you're sticking him into the situation, and you're basically saying, good luck, right? So first of all, it's insulting to Vicario, his number one, because he's dropped him. It's more dropping than rotation. It's egg on the face of the Spurs fans who were cheering on Vicario's, dropping for about 5 minutes of the game until they figured out that, the stand-in was extremely shaky. And you're right, Maka, that, we isolate in highlight reels. You're going to isolate maybe the keeper dropping one over the line or dropping a cross or whatever. It's not about whether should that cross have come in. It's not about did their defender give them enough protection from a corner. It's always just a mistake, right? That gets like isolated and abstracted, right? And I agree. Now, the problem with tonight, Maka, as Jamie pointed to, was that these were, I mean, one of them, the ball gets back passed at him. It's a fair rate, but there's no reason he should do anything except just control it and pass it out. And then the first one, if I remember rightly, is when they do this ridiculous contemporary quirk of modern football, which is when the defender takes the goal kick, passes it to the goalkeeper, who is immediately under pressure, because as soon as you pass the ball, would you believe it, that means the opposition can press into your box. It's almost as if this is designed for the goalkeeper to take this kick because they can take their time and they have protection. Isn't it this amazing thing where a goal kick should probably be taken by a goalkeeper, especially if you're not Man City or Arsenal, you're not David Raya, you're not your Allison, just this incredible way of inviting pressure when you guys are already backs against the wall, when you're already odds on to lose this heavily, you're already incredibly mismanaged and so low on confidence. So to answer your question, Mac, I do feel it's a culmination of these things, right? Keepers are under heightened pressure. They are, everything they do is a magnifying glass, right? We know that. But simultaneously today, the poor guy just had an abysmal game. But should he have been taken off? I think absolutely not. I think that's really, 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 really cowardly management from Tudor because he's basically just saying, you're the scapegoat. Now, the thing is, in Tudor's defense, his goalkeeper has gifted the opposition 2 goals. His job's already on the line, and he does that. Sure, he's upset. Sure, he's probably thinking, like probably me and Jamie will, or anyone else who's watching, when's the third error going to come? And I have some level of understanding for why Tudor would think, okay, I'm not going to wait for the third clanger. Because it could have happened. I got the sense that maybe it would have happened. But, as ethically, in terms of care, in terms of support, in terms of optics, you're the manager. You need to just take this on the chin. He's already going to be massacred, right? This goalkeeper, it's clear you didn't coach him to kick the ball, trip over the ball, and kick the ball to their forwards, right? That's out of your hands. But for you to really write the headlines that were there were articles being published on BBC and other places while the game was still happening about this goalkeeper 17 minutes, right? That is humiliating. It's out of order from journalists too. But his manager has really thrown him under the bus. He's reversed the bus over him. And he hasn't even looked him in the eyes as he's walked off the pitch, while 3 other Spurs players who were playing on the field left their positions to go console him as he trudged off the pitch, right? Atletico fans, because there's a little bit of decency in the game, and I didn't think this was sarcastic, Atletico fans, some of them, were clapping as a show of kind of solidarity and support because they knew anyone, as Jamie will attest having seen them, anyone who watched that, you have to be really, really heartless not to think, thank God that person's not me, and that person needs some support. Such were the magnitude, I think, Maka, of these self-inflicted errors from Kinski. They were bad. They were really
Who was
bad.
the Villa goalkeeper years ago? Was it Enkelman or someone when the throw in that hit his stud and went under his foot?
Yeah,
it was that level.
It was as bad as I've seen. It was as bad as I've seen. Both
Nick
of them were
Hancock would have put it in his Footballing Nightmares DVD.
Absolutely. So it was bad, but I mean, he was done no favors by his manager. A, to select him, which was outrageous and so silly, and B, to drag him off. I think that's a real failure of leadership, and I think Tudor should be sacked tomorrow. I think it's a disgrace.
Yeah, Jay, in terms of just expanding the picture a little bit, my conviction always was, and maybe it's because my dad was a great goalkeeper. He was a great amateur goalkeeper, so he was very much in the Peter Shilton kind of old school, Ray Clements old school goalkeeping thing, that the goalkeeper's there to stop the ball going in the back of the net and everything else after that is gravy. I've kind of always felt that myself. Do you think goalkeepers have maybe a little bit less protection now because they are expected to be almost sweepers, like outfield sweepers, and not every goalkeeper is equipped to do that? Goalkeeper, it's a specialist position. If I could go back in time and do, because I was at good clubs when I was a youth player, I just wasn't a good youth player, but I was at good clubs that had scouts at them, that maybe if I was a goalkeeper like my dad and who could give me hints and tips and stuff like that, I might have had a little bit, I might have represented my county or something like that at least. But it's like, players are goalkeepers because A, they want to be goalkeepers, or B, because they're not good enough in the outfield. That's essentially when you're kids, how it happens. You're not good, you're going in goal. That's the way it's working. I don't care if it's your ball. We kick the crap out of you if you try and take it off us. No, at least that was my skill. It's a specialist position. Are we exposing goalkeepers to this criticism by expecting them to do things that maybe not every goalkeeper, at least these older generations or younger generations that are coming up now, maybe the current 16-year-old goalkeepers will have been brought up from day one playing football with their feet, but there's still a generation of keepers that didn't. Are you overexposing into errors by making them do this stupid passing from the back thing that they're not really able to do?
I think you know what I'm going to say. Yes, right. I think we've overshifted towards the kind of what managers think is what Barcelona do, and then suddenly what used to be common English way of playing football, the long ball, is suddenly like, wow, this is different. And maybe the pendulum will switch back as soon as the goalkeepers are, as you say, the 16-year-olds coming in now, like outfield players. I think they are exposed, right? They most likely weren't brought up playing that way. If you think of a lot of the goalkeepers from kind of 90s, early 2000s, like you mentioned Schmeichel, like he wasn't the best ball player. He was fine, right? But he wasn't playing with the ball at his feet. I think one of the first, like Barthez was, and he seemed like an absolute madman for United. And then I think like goalkeepers in the Premier League, like Courtois was, I guess, one of the first who was really good with his feet. And then like Ederson and Alisson, fantastic. David Raya, fantastic. But to expect all goalkeepers to perform like that is setting them up for failure. Equally, setting if you don't have players who are capable of playing tiki-taka football and expecting them to play out from the back, you're probably setting your team up for fail in the same way. Yeah. I think we've spoken in a few months ago about how you look at the assets that you have in your team and you play to your logical football that you mentioned earlier to your team's strengths. Like I've got a 6'5" forward who should probably put some crosses into the box then because he's probably going to win some headers, especially against 6 foot centre backs these days. But yeah, we are setting them up for failure. And it's also such a fragile position, like where you can really get on players' backs. Like you think about Courtois for Real Madrid when he was at Chelsea. Chelsea bought him from Genk and then put him at Atletico Madrid on loan for 2+ years to give him some confidence before we bought him back to be the Chelsea keeper, and then ultimately selling him on to Real Madrid. That seems like what Chelsea's going to do with Mike Penders. He's our kind of goalkeeper to be. That it seemed like the only reason we kept Sanchez around was because Penders is going to be the guy next year. But hearing rumblings that to protect him and give him another year of experience so he doesn't create a mistake and it just ruins his whole career, that we are going to loan him out again and then to keep building that confidence so that any high profile error does not become a kind of a career ender, so to speak. But yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on goalkeepers, like not just to stop the ball, but to distribute and be part of the build-up that kind of starts attacks. When done well, it is an absolute asset, and it's you're playing with half a player extra. But when done poorly, you are hamstringing your team and probably playing half a man down.
I mean, look, on the Discord channel, like the topic about Mignolet, and my puzzlement always was that they brought in Brendan Rodgers, who was well known in 2012 for playing that whole tiki-taka style. One of the few clubs in Britain that were doing that religiously. And he did it because he had Michel Vorm, who was really, really good at his feet. Maybe a bit small for a goalkeeper, but great with his feet. So they went, you know what, if you want to replicate that, so let's get that guy from Sunderland who stays on his line all the time. Yeah. There's a mismatch there somewhere. But let's move on to this guy here, Igor Tudor. But it's True That Crisps, like from the 1970s. I used to love those commercials. You get paid in Tudor crisps. Now, Chelsea are now stranger to the interim manager. I don't know about Brentford and interim managers, but have you had any?
We must have. We had a very short-lived manager in the Championship who lasted about 9 games, which is very un-Brentford, like quite a few years ago. But so we must have had one then. But usually, it's we've just done Thomas Frank for such a long time. It's hard to remember.
Well, what I was going to get at is, I know there was controversy for Rafa Benitez with the whole title of who he was at Chelsea. But I remember like Gus Hiddink coming in. Like even to an extent, Avram Grant, as embarrassing as that may be to remember, he was somebody that the players were confident enough that they could kind of gather around almost in spite of Avram Grant. But he didn't seem like a harmful, malignant presence at the club. He looked like he was trying to take his chance because he knew he'd never get another one like it. Benitez wanted to restore his reputation. Roy Hodgson, time and time again, coming in mid-season and galvanizing the team within a couple of weeks. Igor Tudor seems to come in with dropping hand grenades all over the place. He's like the worst interim manager you could ever appoint. Like he's media-wise, if nothing else, he really doesn't look like he's there to do any good, does he?
It's abysmal. No, as soon as he's appointed, I think I said last week, he was giving Ralph Rangnick vibes. Got Ralph Rangnick, came into United when they were in a similar situation, not quite as bad, but a similar situation of just crisis to crisis. And he figured out, he tried to, he was the Gegenpress godfather, right? He was the guy that started it. And he realized pretty quickly.
Let's get it straight. Jack Charlton started it. You really know your history.
He claimed it. And no one knew who he was, right? Nobody had it. The players, the jokes where the players were Googling him. If anything, Tudor was even smaller in terms of at least legacy with this appointment. Incredibly bizarre appointment. The rationale was he kickstarts teams when he arrives, right? Which isn't the worst rationale in theory.
Maybe they were talking about the bikes that the players owned. Maybe that's what he kickstarted. Because
the coach. He's good at jump starting the coach. But I mean, it has been calamitous. I mean, it is obviously the thing is this goes so beyond a single manager. I think you could put anyone in there. You could bring Pochettino back. You could, I don't know, list any world-class manager, throw Pep in there for a couple of weeks. Like this job, you get the sense would break a lot of very, very good managers. And Thomas Frank, it was a bad match. The team ended up playing dour football. Nobody liked it. It was an unhappy marriage, and it probably should have ended sooner than it did. But simultaneously, maybe it ended too soon if this guy was the answer.
Yeah, I was going to ask. It's almost like they would have been better off keeping Thomas Frank.
Clearly, they wouldn't have. It wouldn't have done worse. Now, this is the risk you take, right? If you drop a manager who, I mean, the hierarchy at Spurs, to some credit, saw Frank as a longer term project, and they really did try. They had pressure from the fans to get rid of him weeks and weeks and weeks before he was eventually torpedoed, and they resisted that. They just kept getting bad results, and they just kept playing such awful football. And I think Spurs are really testing the age-old mantra, can it always get worse, right? And I think the answer for them this season is it can. It can. Now, can it get worse from this situation? Maybe not, actually, right? If Tudor stays and Liverpool win 4 or 5-0 at the weekend, or even if you just win 2-0, doesn't even matter. If you win 1-0, it doesn't matter. This is one of their longest losing runs in like 50, 60, 70 years. It just seems it's with the power of hindsight. But at the time, I said the day he was appointed, I wasn't familiar with him. Did a little bit of research. I felt absolutely said to a couple of mates, my dad's like, I don't think this is a particularly smart appointment. Did I think it was going to be this bad? Absolutely not. It just seemed like a left field appointment when what the club was desperately screaming for was Premier League stability and a manager who's familiar with the Premier League. Right now, the list of managers who have that kind of, it's not like a fixed list that are always going to be ready to come into a really messy project mid-season, right? But you have to think there must have been better options. But because otherwise, as you said, Macca, keep Thomas Frank. Would they prefer Thomas Frank or Igor Tudor to coach the game against Liverpool? It's going to be Thomas Frank, right? The fans know that. And again, with Spurs, you do feel like everything's toxic at the club, right? Ownership, the back room, the players are absolutely abysmal. And Jamie, I'm going to keep saying it's an abysmal squad with the asterisks of some key injuries. I think this is a really, really, really abysmal group of players in attitude as much as quality, I think, in attitude. But the fans at Spurs don't half hurt themselves because they hounded Ange out and he delivered them a trophy. And yes, 17th place in the division is a disgrace. But what if Thomas Frank and Igor Tudor shown that 17th place is where they're meant to be? They are, for whatever reason, and it's not player for player squad quality, but for whatever culmination of factors, whatever toxic smog is covering Spurs right now, they are a team that is playing, is acting, and, emerging as a bottom 6 Premier League team. Now, why would you fire Ange and then Thomas Frank, who are just starting to get to know the players, the systems? I don't think Frank was going to work, and I think he was going to go sooner rather than later. I think Ange is the one they should have kept. Frank was a bad appointment, but obviously Tudor is it's almost, farcical how badly he's done and how bizarre an appointment that was and how much of a mismatch this is, because he is just so out of his depth. He's got no respect for the players. The players have no respect for him. And it's only going one way, right? It's only going down. So he has to be booted. The only thing you say after that is he going to be booted tomorrow or Sunday or Monday? Who knows? But he's going to go. Surely he has to go. You just don't see them spinning 3 wins on a bounce. You just don't see that. So the next thing, right, Macca or Jamie, is like, well, where the hell do you go? Because Pochettino's busy. Do you call like a kind of Harry Redknapp, Robbie Keane kind of like, collaboration? Is this just is Ryan Mason? Where's he just got fired, didn't he, recently? Do you give it Mason till the end of the season? You've just run out of road. You've run out of road. And United did this a couple of years ago and it was a disaster, but it's even worse at Spurs. It's just even worse.
Now, Jamie, sometimes a club or a specific team can be held back by a single player creating a toxic environment. Not always intentionally, like sometimes just, like that driven ego kind of player that you need when you're winning is not the player you need in the crew when you're up against it. There was a time in the 80s or 90s when you could see what Chelsea were trying to do with Hoddle and that. I think I want to say, I may be getting this wrong, but Dennis Wise might have been still at the club, and Dennis Wise was still in the crazy gang mentality at Wimbledon, and you didn't need him anymore. You didn't need that at Chelsea. We were trying to get, we're only a year or two away from the Ruud Gullit kind of that era, Vialli and all that, when you were becoming more cosmopolitan, sometimes you need to get rid of that player who's trying to make it more of a social thing than a competitive athletic thing. Is there a Richarlison-shaped hole in this Spurs culture? Because he did seem toxic at Everton. He sometimes seems like a bit of a whinge bag at Spurs. Is it possible that the culture is, what's his name? Is it Porro? Who was the one that got sent off there recently? Was it Pedro, a couple of weeks ago? Romero, yeah. Like that kind of, like, they're just, you need to get rid of them first before you start thinking about coaches. Like the way Ferguson got rid of the drinking culture at United before you could even start thinking about great players like Paul McGrath, Norman Whiteside, and that, but you had to get rid of them in order to start building his own thing. Is there a possible player culture problem there at Spurs that's hampering all of these managers?
I think there's definitely a player. There's definitely a culture problem, right? And I think it starts with the ownership. It always has. I think Levy got a bad rap, but like Lewis's group's been in power a while, even if they've been in the back. I think there's definitely a player issue. I'd say I don't know enough about Spurs to say exactly who it is. I think they would be smart to cash in on Romero and or Richarlison or whomever. And if they are toxic, Romero feels like he could be a little bit. And even though on paper, him and Van de Ven are a great centre-back pairing, right? But before Van de Ven got injured, they were billed as some of the best in the league. But yeah, there's absolutely a culture problem. The Spurs fans do not help themselves with, as Glenn, you so articulately put it, hounding out all the managers and then finding themselves in this situation. I think they're in a very different situation than Chelsea are in, right? So like we had success with a lot of interim managers, like Avram Grant, Benitez trying to kind of redo his career, Roberto Di Matteo. All of those three were built on a spine of like a Mourinho-built team with John Petr Cech or Courtois and Didier Drogba, Frank Lampard, like elite players. You got an England captain.
Not
there.
Joe Cole. Not Joe Cole.
The players are basically running the team
Yeah.
And the managers kind of just sit like he's a figurehead effectively. And then you had Gus Hiddink, who was a 2-time interim manager, and he'd had enough success, enough respect from the players to be like, he's our leader. And you leave, like if Ancelotti came into Tottenham, like you'd be like, oh, I guess he's multiple-time Champions League winner. We probably listen to what he says. But Igor Tudor doesn't come with the same CV. So then, and the players are also not the same. You haven't got a John Terry, Frank Lampard, or a Didier Drogba. The spine of a team is not there. On paper, they're actually quite a good outfit, I think, but there's just no culture bringing them together. I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and there's some clearly toxic players as well, and this you just don't see it necessarily getting better. I think I agree with you, Glenn. I agree with you, Maka. Like Igor Tudor was a terrible appointment, and it shows a team. It shows a club that clearly wanted to stick with Thomas Frank, panicked and pulled in Igor Tudor, which was quite like the Man United appointment with Ranić when you're like, who? And in modern football, I also think that especially if you have a player culture or a club culture problem, like naming an interim manager is the worst thing you can do. So this modern Chelsea team under the new ownership model, that was not the Abramovich, John Terry, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba Chelsea, but a very different younger Chelsea. Spurs are a very young team as well. We brought in Frank Lampard as an interim manager, gave it to him to the end of the season. And he spoke at length on how it was it was a failure from the start because the players didn't respect what he had to say, because they knew that he wasn't going to be there next season, and they all had 7-year contracts that were going to outlast the manager with a 3-month contract. So, like, whatever you say, we're not going to listen. We're not going to get relegated anyway. Goodbye. Like, maybe Spurs wake up and say, holy shit, this is not we're going to be in the league, you're going to be gone. Like, they are very much in a relegation fight. If they don't turn things around, these players are gone. And maybe they want to be gone. Maybe they have clauses in their contract about wages and whatnot and releases if they get relegated, but somehow I doubt it. Like, you're not really going to get a high value player if you at Tottenham, and if you say, and we want a relegation clause in your contract. I'm sorry, what? I'm sure Real Madrid don't have relegation clauses in Vinicius Junior's contract just in case they get relegated from La Liga. If Spurs want to be a Big Six club, I doubt they have the same thing too. But yeah, to circle back to your actual question, definitely a culture problem. Don't know exactly what I do because I don't know who the culture problem is coming from. But if it looks like Richarlison and or Romero, then whomever it is, maybe we haven't mentioned them yet. I think it's certainly a good idea to try and cut that foul kind of piece for the good of the club. And you could also you could do with doing a Chelsea and just bomb squatting them to try and you can't afford to wait till next season because you're in a relegation fight right now. Everyone needs to want to be there. And I know I keep bringing up Chelsea, but we had a spine of the team that lived and breathed Chelsea, which is why with the interim manager that we didn't need the motivation because the players provided it themselves. Spurs don't have that, right? At all. And you really need a bunch of, I would not be surprised if a bunch of Spurs academy kids actually outperform the team because they at least play and breathe the shirt.
I mean, they are literally a spineless team, but you get what you get when you hire a manager who is named after crisps from the northeast of England. That's what happens.
I don't know who I'd bring in though. If he gets fired, like it would have to. You have to be a Mason. Like I think Harry
Redknapp. Mick McCarthy. That's who they need. They need Mick McCarthy.
He's probably 82, isn't he? How old? Harry Redknapp, I think, is 80.
Brilliant. Yeah, Harry Redknapp's about 80. Yeah. Probably still do a good deal though through his car window.
Yeah, Harry Redknapp and. Whom else? Like Tony Pulis,
Alan Corbishley. That's who they want.
Hodgson.
Oh no, what's his name? Pardew. That's who they need. Alan Pardew. That's who'll do the job. Let's move on to the fixtures for this weekend. We have Liverpool Spurs, as we've talked about. Brentford Wolves. Glenn, talk us through that game.
Yeah. Last game of the weekend. We should win that. Wolves are revitalized, and if Wolves are going to stay up, they need to beat us. So hopefully they're not Well, who knows? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, for Wolves to stay up, they need to win everything, but the way they're going to play, I think they'd set up to frustrate us and play a low block, which we struggled to break down, right? If it was Wolves away, I'd be a little concerned because they've become a bit of a force at Molineux in the last couple of weeks. They picked up some very, very strong results. Away from home, Brentford, G-Tech, we want to put the FA Cup disappointment behind us. Dango's going to want to go. Thiago scored a brace yesterday, so he's going to be looking to get back on the score sheet. I think we should have enough to beat Wolves. I mean, that's a game. Wolves, despite recent form, are bottom of the table for a reason. Brentford, if we want to push for Europe, we need to beat the team that's bottom of the table, whatever their form. So, yeah, we should be in for a win. I don't take it for granted. I think Wolves will put up a good fight. They're clearly improved. Rob Edwards has really worked some magic there, actually, because they just look an average, low mid-table Premier League team now. The problem is that's come 5 months too late for them. You know what I mean? Like, that's just where they're at. He just went into a certain relegation, basically. But yeah, credit to Wolves. They're still fighting. Unlike Spurs, Wolves have shown a hell of a lot more passion and guile and guts in the last month or two than anyone has at Spurs. So yeah, you never know. I mean, who else are their relegation rivals? I mean, it's just a step too far for Wolves, obviously. But if Liverpool beat Spurs, if Man City beat West Ham, you'd expect both of them. If Bournemouth beat Burnley, and then if Fulham beat Forest, if they were to come into Monday with all those results going their way, Wolves, it's 99% certain, but you never know until it's absolutely mathematical. So, they'll come fired up. And I think we're going to be under pressure to get a result because of the table and because of our disappointment in the FA Cup. So should be a pretty, I think, hard-fought game, that one. I think that would be a decent watch.
Jay, Chelsea, Newcastle, do you think they'll have one eye on the Barcelona second leg? And if so, will that help you? Or are they just inconsistent regardless? So it doesn't really matter who they're playing in the next game.
They've had another day's rest over Chelsea. We're playing tomorrow. But I think they will have one eye on the Barcelona game. But equally, it's hard to say without
having the PSG game. Yeah.
I think on current form, we should comfortably beat them. But they've been a bit of a bogey side for us. Thankfully, this one's at home. We'll see. Like we really need to get. We won our last Premier League game, but we had a 3-game blip of 2 points out of a possible 9. We need to continue this form and pick up 3 points, which we should do. But I guess who knows? But there's some tasty fixtures here.
Man United Villa is always to me 1993. Yeah, Saturday 3:10 on the RT radio television game. John Fashanu, gigs and all that there. Josh is in. You should have been here an hour ago, Josh. Come on, man. Every week. Where do you think he lands next, Glenn? Thomas Frank?
Yeah, good question. Maybe Germany. Would he maybe? I get the feeling, though. You'd think maybe a strong German team would be a really good fit for him, right? But there's just something about the bug of being a Premier League manager. It is the best league in the world, right? I think it is. That's how it's marketed. I think that is the reality. The Champions League probably shows that, at least up until now. I just get the sense that he lives and breathes English football right now, and he will go on to manage internationally. And obviously, Denmark would be the fit. I would not be surprised if he. The problem is, as Josh kind of points to, his stock has fallen with the job he did at Spurs. It rose with Brentford astronomically, and it obviously nosedived with Spurs. So a bigger club wouldn't take him on. I think with the issues at Spurs he had, a lot of clubs would be. I don't know. Do they view Frank and Brentford as just this match made in heaven, right? And that was his Premier League team. Do you know what I mean, Mac? Or do they think no, tactically, which I agree with. Tactically, he showed his nous at Brentford. Spurs is a basket case club. He more than deserves another opportunity, which is true. I'm just curious about where his stock is. Like, it would only be a mid-table or lower team, maybe a promoted team that would maybe look to turn to him, right? So I think
maybe if Fulham if Marco Silva leaves at the end of this season,
wouldn't do Brentford to Fulham. He couldn't go to Fulham.
What about a Villa if someone bigger comes after Emery?
They wouldn't. Villa wouldn't go for Frank after Emery. They're just not
Palace,
after Spurs.
maybe.
Palace, maybe, but Glasner. I do think his credit has taken a bit of a hit. I don't think there are that many clubs post Spurs that would be really, really buzzing for his appointment, which is a real shame. I could be wrong. So does he go international or Europe, Germany, Spain, whatever, and say, hey, I want to reset? Or does he do maybe a bit of a Graham Potter where he ended up taking, the West Ham job at the bad time? Like, I just hope whatever decision he makes, he does his research, which clearly he didn't with Spurs behind the scenes. He clearly went into Spurs unprepared. That just seems apparent. I hope he picks a club with a better culture than Spurs because he's a great manager. He's a top manager. And I just think Spurs is a uniquely cursed club at the moment. But I do worry for him with his stock falling at Spurs. He's less of an attractive signing for a club than he was 6 months ago, which is a real shame.
I'd say this Tudor reign, short as it may be, like many Tudor reigns.
You learn history on this show as well, kids. You learn history and football equally.
I think this actually helps him, though. It proves that he wasn't the problem and that it is a basket case. So, like, his stock, while has gone down, maybe rises a little bit if this continues at Spurs.
I'm going to make a Tonali man because we're going to go into the Tonali picks now in a second. The Tonali manager pick, Thomas Frank, 2026-27 Celtic manager.
Celtic, I like that a lot. I like that.
Yeah, they need somebody to rebuild the club from
from
the bottom up. There's the Tonali picks time there. Boys, have a look at it again. Is there any Tonali picks there at all this week? Is Everton the Tonali pick for anybody? Will West Ham do something over City? Will Spurs actually beat Liverpool?
I'd say a draw. West Ham could. I don't want them to because I don't want Arsenal to be able to walk this, but I could see West Ham. They've got momentum. They've won the last 2 Premier League games. They're at home. They just won it. They just won midweek. They rotated their players, so they should be fresh. I could see that. City are not the City of old, so without taking Glenn's pick, that's going to be mine.
Glenn, any ideas there? Do you see anything that's interesting?
No, I like Jamie's pick. I like the rationale. You've got Everton. For the title race to take another turn, you need a City win and an Arsenal to drop points, which is possible. But I agree with Jamie. It probably is more likely that Man City drop points than Arsenal do this weekend, which is not great for people who might just want a more competitive end to the season.
Don't Arsenal have a bit of a hoodoo, or Everton have a bit of a hoodoo over Arsenal, though?
They do. The one I'd look at, I don't mind the early kickoff or early-ish. Oh, no, it's not super early. Burnley getting something against Bournemouth, maybe Burnley beating Bournemouth. If Burnley are going to stay up, which again feels extremely unlikely, especially considering Wolves are now just 3 points behind them. It's basically, do they get overtaken? They do have a game in hand, over Wolves at least. They are, 9 points off, which is tough. But if they were to win and West Ham were to lose, which is very possible, that becomes a 6-point gap, which is 2 results going your way while they lose. I fancy Burnley to maybe beat Bournemouth just to fire up that relegation battle even further. Wouldn't that be exciting if Burnley mount a very, very late charge? Because then everyone's looking over their shoulder. Everyone will be looking over their shoulder.
Indeed, you do. Let's move that one out and then add, just for people to look at, the table. There we go. Arsenal at the top, not what we all want to see. But City do have that game in hand. So let's hope for some reverses of fortune there. Chelsea, it's tight in that. Like, even Brentford are now catching up with this. Every time Chelsea and Liverpool drop points, that 5th place spot and the 4th place spot and the 3rd place spot, even that could be I did that. That could be a huge game. But
they're dropping like a stone, though.
Yeah, they really are, aren't they? Mid-table, as we discussed earlier, Fulham not really doing anything one way or the other. Should have put their eggs in the FA Cup basket, but Leeds down to West Ham. That is going to be a tight race coming up to the end of the season. I have a feeling that Spurs might get caught into that in the last 3 games, into that relegation battle. I have a funny feeling stuck into that. Like they won't be safe by any stretch of the imagination. And I believe aren't they one of the, like Liverpool and Arsenal, one of the teams that haven't been relegated in donkey's years. So it'll be a momentous occasion if it happens. But that's the table. Now, first of all, I want to thank the lads for being with me again tonight on my worst retirement ever from doing this podcast.
That's what Harry Redknapp's going to say, Mako, when he gets pulled
Harry
into action.
Say, well, if you enjoy this kind of nonsense, and I mean nonsense from my point of view, but the insightful views of the lads, you got to do this. You got to follow us on the YouTube, hit that subscribe button, the bell for the notifications and the likes, and do the same. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and X formerly known as Twitter, Mastodon, and of course Uri Geller's telepathic social media. It's in the power of your mind. So, gentlemen, thank you again for being with us. And it's getting to the tail end. I only looked at that table there when I pulled it up, and there's only 8 games there for a lot of teams, 9 games for a lot of teams. It's flown in, and then we may have a World Cup. If not, we'll have a World War. So entertainment either way. But we'll see what happens, especially what happened with the Haiti players from that Jamaican team today. It could be an interesting World Cup with only 17 players available for anybody. The USA will surely win it then. So for everybody else, I believe there may be a morning coffee show tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. But that's why you follow us, so you can find all that stuff out. And then the Thursday podcast will be on as usual. Champions League games tomorrow, Conference and Europa League games, I believe, as well on the other Thursday. Maybe it's a full packed house of games, but we're back to normal on the weekend. That's what we want, and we're only 4 hours behind them over there for a couple of weeks.
I know. We get some nicer time games. It's
great. Nice time games. Yeah. So enjoy it. Peace out, people. Be safe, and keep encouraging that spring to come along, because I can finally see my garden again after several months. It's great. Have a good one, people. Peace out. Here's some funky music.